Redistricting obviously was a big emphasis at the Capitol this week. We're glad the process is over and believe that the maps that the court has drawn were fair. There really are a lot of competitive districts all across the state, but I really think it's important that we emphasize that the lines that really are going to matter as we move forward in this next election and over the next decade are the lines that are drawn by the votes people take here at the Capitol. Votes either to protect middle-class families or to protect big corporations and special interests. And based on both set of lines, we think that Democrats are in a good chance, in a strong position heading into November. But before then, we do have a lot of work to do. We've been in session for a month as of today. And once again, despite a lot of big talk, there's been really no urgency whatsoever on the part of the Republicans on any jobs proposals or any bills to strengthen our middle-class economy, middle-class families. If things don't change, I am fearful that 2012 is going to be a repeat of the Do-Nothing 2011 session, which was the least productive session in the history of the state. So my question really, and I think the question Minnesotans ought to be asking, is when? When are we going to see some serious jobs bills? Representative House on the floor yesterday said they're not really interested in even starting on a bonding bill until 2 weeks into March. When are we gonna get after these fundamental issues Minnesotans are caring about? And I would say that that Representative David's bill to give corporate property tax relief to places like Walmart and pay for it by increasing property taxes on renters of 300,000 renters across the state, 86,000 seniors and people with disabilities. That doesn't cut it. That's not going to work for Minnesota going forward. So I, again, as I have probably every week since we've started session, will encourage the Republicans to start hearing some of the very specific targeted jobs bills that we have put out there. We have 7 of them. They're smart, targeted, that we will actually get people back to work and solve some of the structural problems in our economy and foster a strong middle-class economy. Those are the ideas that we can move forward with, get things signed, and get out of here, and get the job that Minnesotans want us to get done. So the clock is ticking. And I hope that we are not, again, going to see a do-nothing legislature this session, and that the Republicans will join us in making sure that jobs truly are a priority.
Very good. Thank you, Representative Thissen. And just to highlight a couple of things that haven't yet been talked about, I just came from 2 committees that meet on Fridays, which is a little unusual. This morning we met in the redistricting on my mind, you can see that, Reform and Redesign Committee. We met this morning at 8:30, and then I raced from there to go to the Sunset Commission. And the thing that's interesting about both those 2 committees, and really feels a little bit different, is the degree of bipartisanship that is present in both of them. So, for example, this morning in the Reform and Redesign Committee, Senator Daley put forward a plan to take a look at the functions of back office agencies and see if they wouldn't be better suited to be all under the Department of Admin. And some of us have said, well, we think probably that's true, but shouldn't we take a step back and look at that from a research-based approach? Shouldn't we look at, what are the data analytics around that? What do we think the best practices are? And so he put forward an amendment today that would begin a benchmarking study on that, as well as looking at the school district back office functions and doing a benchmarking study for that. Commissioner Cronk came to the table. He is thrilled about that. That's exactly the direction the Department of Administration wants to go. And so I'm hopeful that we'll actually get that done this session to begin that benchmarking study. In addition, the Sunset Commission, we had pretty much come up with all of our recommendations, and then there were some pretty big public crisis, actually, with regard to a big story around the Medical Licensing Board, leaving people concerned about can they trust the doctors they're going to. So we called for a new meeting, and we said, let the people come forward. Let's do an investigation. There were some problems with the Council on Black Minnesotans, and so we brought them to the table today so they could testify. And here you have a situation with 6 Democrats, 6 Republicans, and we do have consensus. So there are pockets of it, but I think that it really underscores what's missing in so many other areas. As we spent hours yesterday on the Senate floor talking about the expansion of the Castle Doctrine, it was so disappointing that for the most part that was a party line vote. And yet I shared on the Senate floor, I'm a layperson. I don't have expertise with regard to gun policy. My dad hunted, my brothers hunted, I went with them, my sons hunt, but with regard to the appropriate gun policy, I have no idea. So what do? I call the experts. I call my police chiefs, who I have so much respect for, and they were quite unified. They actually wanted to meet with me and explain to me the dangers of what was being proposed. And the police chiefs, as we know, across the state came out with a very unified position. Yet, we proceeded to spend hours discussing our opinions on that legislation as though passing this legislation was going to protect our constitutional right to bear arms. That certainly wasn't the point of that legislation. So it was disappointing that that legislation did pass in the Senate, even though we did stand up quite strongly and say that, in fact, the police chiefs were very strong that it would increase their sense of not being able to protect themselves and the public. Another thing that continues to be a source of concern is whether or not we are going to move forward with the constitutional amendment around voter ID. One positive sign in that effort has been Secretary Ritchie's been showing this electronic poll book and the ability to use that. There's been interest. I think we already have some Republican people have come forward in the Senate to be chief author on that effort. And so we're going to continue talking about, is there a legislative fix that could be accomplished on a bipartisan basis? I don't know if that's possible, but it's certainly something worth pursuing. We passed out of committee the teacher evaluation / relooking at seniority. We'll see where that goes. It'll be on the floor on Monday. So, questions?
On that topic, do you expect that to pass?
Yes, I definitely expect it to pass. It's something that I've supported. I think we've got this teacher evaluation task force that has been given the directive in law to design a very rigorous and thorough teacher evaluation system using multiple measures. That won't be done for a couple years. So what this legislation says is when that is done, that then we should move to a system where when layoffs happen, that we look at effectiveness first and seniority second. I know there is controversy around this. Some people think that's moving too fast, that we should wait and see what does that teacher evaluation system look like. How can we, standing here, say that's the right thing? And I certainly value that opinion. I don't know at the end of the day whether the governor will say that he wants to wait until that happens, and I can appreciate and respect that. I'm of the belief that as a leader, I should let that task force know that that's the direction I want them to go with regard to teacher evaluations, and I think it's easier having that direction on the front end than the back end, but room for disagreement on that.
On the Castle Doctrine, Senator, didn't four DFLers vote for the Castle Doctrine bill?
They did. I said mostly party line votes. Yep.
Doesn't that suggest that their argument is beginning to settle in among even your own members? That
There were also Republicans that voted against it, as you know.
Yeah, Jim, the people who voted with that were the outstate rural legislators, and I think that they'll always be strong gun rights senators. It kind of divides more along geographic lines, but where we have the most violence in our communities, it really is, if you look at it, Minneapolis, St. Paul, first-ring suburbs, those police chiefs lobbied their legislators so strongly that you'll see even Jeff Michel, while all the Republicans were united on the other side, he voted with the police chiefs.
And strikingly, Keith Downey and Jennifer Loon and the folks out in Woodbury, Kathy Lomer, voted against their constituents and what their constituents would want in favor of that bill last year. It's just another example, I think, in their caucus of a number of their suburban members towing the party line instead of representing their constituents.
Do you two have a sense of what the governor is thinking on this one? I know he's promised Representative Cornish in the House on the Castle Doctrine bill that he's going to wait till it gets to his desk. Have Democrats been reaching out to him, trying to get him to promise a veto on it or not?
No.
Do you think you should?
No. The governor will make up his own mind.
Okay, so Democrats aren't going to be lobbying him on this one.
Well, we've let him know where we stand, but, so is the other side. I've noticed about this governor, you might have noticed this, Mary, he pretty much does what he wants to do. So I think that he has said that he takes what law enforcement says into account, and he has strong respect for them, but at the end of the day, I don't know what he'll do either.
And you don't have a sense what he'd do on the last in, first out bill either?
No.
Nope.
I mean, from my perspective, it's a bill that doesn't work in very practical ways, and I don't know why we're rushing it through instead of trying to figure out something that will actually work, but that's me.
Are you trying to sway him otherwise? Not necessarily we should tease him with the governor.
With regard to
She's trying to persuade me, too.
Yes, I am. Yeah, because this is something that I do feel strongly about. I think it is important. The big issue that we often don't discuss is that every single year we have layoffs. Without question, there are layoffs in our schools, and the group I'm most concerned about are our new up-and-coming teachers, our probationary teachers, because for the most part, we really aren't laying off our tenured teachers because we have this pool of probationary teachers. So I'm quite concerned that as the teachers retire into the future, that where are we building our new strongest core of excellent young teachers? Should they supplant? No, this should be about effectiveness. And one thing that I always qualify in my remarks is that we lead the nation in ACT scores. Lead the nation. We wouldn't lead the nation if our teachers didn't lead the nation. We have outstanding, excellent teachers. This is not about that. This is about making sure that we manage our personnel with an eye towards effectiveness first and seniority second. It's simple.
Do you have any concerns about certain organizations, like conservative groups who seem to be sponsoring a lot of legislation, say collective bargaining, those kind of things that seem to be having more of an influence, and maybe some of the bills are not necessarily coming from constituents, like you mentioned?
Yeah, I do have a great concern about that, and I think the unintended consequence of that is then when you have bills that I think maybe have some merit, that they're dismissed because they look like they're part of that group sponsored by ALEC, as we refer to it. And it shouldn't be. We ought to, as legislators, craft our own bills coming from what's important to the people in Minnesota, certainly not some party line agenda which is dividing our nation and is very costly. You want to add to that?
Don't a lot of bills come as model bills? I mean, hasn't that been the case around here for years and years? That other states...
I've never offered a model bill. I mean, there is the Uniform Law Act, like for the UCC and those kind of things that lawyers care about, but I don't think any bill I've ever offered is a model bill. And I don't think that is in fact the case. And I guess to this point, I think that there is an issue with the influence of some of these Washington, D.C. right-wing think tanks pushing their agenda on a national basis to influence national politics. And Minnesota has always done better when we have homegrown solutions to things. But more important than kind of who is pushing these issues, I think it's who is benefiting from them. And I think that is a very clear analysis. Whether you believe ALEC is pushing these bills or not, who's benefiting from a lot of the bills, almost every bill that's passed off the House floor, are large corporations and special interests, from my perspective, and they're continuing the squeeze on middle-class families. That is the bottom line, and the Republicans in their bills are not doing the two things that Minnesotans are asking us right now, which is to deal with residential property tax relief and to deal with jobs. And that's what we need to get back, that's what Minnesotans want, and that's what we need to get back to and get the focus of this legislature back to.
Aren't corporations people too?
The Republicans the Republican House caucus voted unanimously to say yes on the House floor.
One more thing on the Castle Doctrine, or shoot first, whatever you want to call it, gun bill. Is there any chance of another amendment when it hits the House floor, something to water it down? They added something from sheriffs on the Senate floor. Do you know if there's any chance?
It's up to the author. I mean, the two choices are either we concur, which you can't amend, or you send it to conference committee. Yeah. So we won't have a chance in the vote on Monday to amend it.
Conference, you think that's possible, or you think that's just going
to
move it to the governor?
Representative Cornish. I have no control over that. I think he probably will concur.
I've been surprised by the amount of concurrence happening on the Senate floor. I mean, in the past, we've really prided ourselves on not doing that that's what the process is for, that you take a Senate position, and as a Senate position, you hold strong to it, and the House holds strong to their position. And Conference Committee was really about working out between the House and the Senate who gets to keep their positions, and that hasn't been the style of this session at all. It's been, let's avoid the controversy and the possible conflict that happens in Conference Committee. And I don't think that you get the best legislation that way.
Has there been a conference committee yet on anything?
There was a brief one. Larry Howes had I think it's actually still out in Conference Committee, if I'm not mistaken. There was one appointed. But that I don't even know what the bill was for, to be honest. So, okay.
Yeah, where do the Democrats stand on this repeal or phase out of the business property tax? Which is coming,
right. I guess
coming
what
up.
I would say on that is we've been opposed to it. We had a hearing in the tax committee on it, and really two things I think are important about that. First off, what we've seen is actually property taxes going up on residences, on small businesses, and on ag land across the state. And there's nothing in this property tax relief bill, maybe a tiny sliver, 95% is going to big corporations. So that is a problem with the bill. The balance is wrong. And then the second thing is how they're paying for it. I mean, Representative Davids is literally paying for corporate tax relief to go to Walmart and national banks, these big property tax owners, by raising property taxes on 300,000 renters, including 86,000 seniors and people with disabilities all across the state. Same thing that they did last year. They're siding with these big corporations because somehow they think if we just get out of the way of business, magically Minnesota's going to be better. And they never focus on the actual people who live in the state of Minnesota, who are feeling the squeeze and who actually are the ones that are going to be spending the money to support these businesses ultimately. So it's very wrong priorities. It's the wrong direction for us to be going right now in the state of Minnesota.
And I would just add that it's important that we have a strong business climate, and if we, are going to emerge strong from this recession and be nation leading, we have to have economic growth in Minnesota. We have to have a strong business climate. So I'm for making changes to our tax laws that support and incent that. But on the other hand, we need to also do the work of tax reform. And that's something that, while the Republicans have talked about, in theory, they have not been willing to do. You can't just pick, we're going to help this group, but we aren't going to do anything to keep us stable financially going forward. And so I would say that we have to keep holding the Republicans accountable for, are you willing to do the unpopular thing, the expanding the base of the sales tax to pay for some of these things?
And the other thing we have to remember, as you're looking at spending $80 million on these corporate property tax provisions, we have a school shift to pay back. We have a $1.2 billion deficit facing us. We'll see if that changes a little bit come next week. But we have a $2.1 billion school shift we have to pay back, and a whole series of other things we have to pay back. And somehow that's being lost in the shuffle here.
What do you expect to hear from the budget forecast?
I think we learned last time that making any predictions is not a good idea.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to add on this last subject is, I think it's a mistake to choose between the interests of business and the interests of people, because they're one and the same. The interests of our community comes first. And so, again, that's a cry for working together to make sure we're enacting policies and legislation that supports everybody moving forward.
Senator, what's the Senate caucus thinking about in terms of the forecast? What's your expectation?
Again, I would echo what Representative Thissen said. We shall see. I think our unemployment numbers are a positive indicator, so one would hope that the forecast, but then you hear conflicting things, so too soon to tell.
Thank you.